you. Beautifully done, as always. Really appreciate that.
No, I love you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for that very warm welcome, and Brooke, thank you for the very generous introduction. To follow up on some points that Brooke made, I still feel this sense of emptiness when people get up and talk about the lawsuits that I have waged. Because yes, I am enjoying being the governor of Texas, but there is one thing that I miss from being Attorney General. And that is I no longer get to wake up, go into the office and sue the federal government like I used to. I hold a record that will never be beaten. I sued Barack Obama 31 times. You know, you mentioned if I could deviate into an area that's so dangerous, because people, as Ted Cruz said in his book, when I talk about things like this, you don't know if you're like supposed to stay silent, shriek back, or laugh, or how you're to respond. But it relates to what I call wheelchair jokes. You said that Rick Perry had some big boots to fill, and he did. He'd done some remarkable things as a dynamic leader for the state of Texas, and I applaud my predecessor, Governor Rick Perry, for what he did to elevate the Lone Star State. But when you were saying that, it made me wonder, gosh, when I am gone, is Brooke going to say to the next governor, man, you got some big wheels to follow? Anyone who follows me on Twitter or on Facebook knows that a couple of days ago, the day, almost the minute, that Barack Obama issued his executive order trying to rewrite the Second Amendment. At that time, I posted a picture from the governor's office holding a gun that someone had just given to me that had on it the 48th governor of the state of Texas. Well, I told the guys at the time, because it's the type of gun that I said is perfect just to put in your boot. And it said, darn right. And then I throw in, you know, for me it's particularly good because if it goes off, one of the benefits about being paralyzed is I won't feel it. Got to make lemonade out of lemons. But Brooke, I want to thank you for the introduction. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for what you and your fellow members of the Texas Public Policy Foundation have done. Because you have taken an organization, Wendy, that had its very beginnings in a small office in San Antonio. Now you have one of the most remarkable buildings that you get to call home, filled with some of the best minds in the entire country, and you rival the nationally known conservative think tanks, leading the way. And the results are proof in the pudding. With your help, you kept Texas focused on a conservative agenda. As you said, not only last year did we ensure that taxes were cut, but with the men and women legislators in this room today, it's important to emphasize, Texas rightfully led the nation in cutting taxes. To respond to the federal government's abdication of its responsibility to protect our sovereignty, Texas passed the toughest border security plan of any state, anytime, anywhere in the history of the nation. And with your help, Texas continues to push back against a federal government that has wreaked economic carnage through overreaching and through unconstitutional regulations. But we all know there's a lot more work to do. We need to advance the ball on education reform. And I've already taken a step in that regard by appointing a new dynamic leader for the Texas Education Agency in Mike Morath. We need to ensure that the rule of law is going to be followed in the state of Texas by banning sanctuary city policies. And Senator Van Taylor, yes, we do need real ethics reform like what you wrote last time, not the watered-down version that we got. And knowing that lower taxes is really the best way to attract job creators, we need to continue our efforts to cut taxes in Texas, particularly that margins tax that hinders the expansion of business. And we must continue Texas's leadership in pushing back against an overreaching federal government. Well, Brooke, your unrelenting commitment to bold policy solutions is needed now more than ever. Just consider some of the topics that you all have covered over the past few days. The 10th Amendment, the national debt, the Endangered Species Act, the EPA's Clean Power Plan, and so much more. What common thread do these issues share? They exist because we have a federal government, the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch that have exceeded their authorities. They are imposing laws, rules, and regulations that go far beyond a fair reading of the United States Constitution. Your efforts tackling these problems reminds me of a parable that was told by Tony Evans, a man that many of you may know. Tony told about a homeowner who had cracks in the wall of his house. And so the homeowner called a contractor to come out and fix the cracks in the wall. The contractor came out and pasted over the cracks and then painted over it, and then the wall looked good again. And the homeowner was happy. Then a few years later, cracks reappeared in the wall. The homeowner got to thinking, well, this contractor did such a good job. Last time, I'm going to call him again. And so the contractor came back out, passed over the cracks, painted over it. The wall looked great. The house was fabulous. And the homeowner was happy. A few more years, cracks once again appeared in the wall. By this time, the homeowner was frustrated. He called the contractor and said, hey, listen, I have called you twice, I've paid you twice to fix the walls in my house, and the cracks keep coming back. The contractor said, listen, I understand your concern, but just know this. The problem is not the cracks in the walls of your house. The problem is your foundation. Until you fix the foundation, the cracks are never really going to go away. What TPPF is doing is filling the role of that contractor. You are repairing cracks in the crumbling pillars of our laws and our government. But we need to come to grips with the other parallel with the Tony Evans story. The repairs that you propose through your policy solutions fix only the cracks in the walls of our government. They do make things better, but only for a while. If we really want to fix the problems we face today, we need to fix the fractured foundation of this country. Our government was founded on the rule of law, not the caprice of men. That rule of law flows from our Constitution. The Constitution that is our foundation that is now so often ignored that the founders would hardly even recognize it until we fix the foundation by restoring the rule of law in this nation. The repairs that we seek through the policies you propose will never lead to lasting solutions. Acts this week alone show cracks in our constitutional foundation. The president took action unilaterally that threatens Second Amendment rights, even though the entire point of the Bill of Rights was to protect Americans from invasions of their liberties by the caprice of men just like that. The Constitution was written to protect against those types of dictates. The problem is, these departures from the Constitution are not the aberration. Now they have become the norm. President Obama has repeatedly exceeded his executive powers to impose heavy-handed regulations on issues ranging from climate change to health care reform to changing the immigration laws himself. His immigration executive order is mind-boggling, if for nothing else because of the president's own candor. The president himself said he was a constitutional scholar. The president himself said 20 times he did not have the legal authority to unilaterally change the immigration laws of this nation. And then he abandoned his own legal conclusion. He ignored the plain text of the Constitution that gives the power to the Congress to change the immigration laws, and he got out his pen and he unilaterally rewrote the immigration laws of this nation. Well, Congress is no better. They used to consider whether a proposed law could be squared with Congress's constitutionally enumerated powers. Today's approach is captured by the former Speaker of the House. When she was asked to identify the constitutional authority for the Obamacare individual mandate, she angrily said, "Are you serious?" As if it were some mock question or completely unfounded, that someone would think that Congress has to pass a law that somewhere can be found as a basis in the Constitution. And the Supreme Court is a co-conspirator in the abandonment of the United States Constitution. Instead of applying laws as they are written, the court, quite embarrassingly, strains to rewrite laws like the Obamacare law in order to make them legal. The court frequently departs from what the Constitution actually says, and instead the court amends the Constitution itself by injecting words and concepts that are nowhere found in the Constitution. Well, these increasingly frequent departures from constitutional principles are destroying the rule of law foundation on which this country was built. We are succumbing to the caprice of men that our founders fought to escape. The cure to these problems will not come from Washington, D.C. They must come from the states. To begin that process, I am adding another item to the agenda for the next legislative session. I want legislation authorizing Texas to join other states in calling for a convention of states to fix the cracks in our broken Constitution. This isn't something I thought up today. We have combed through the Federalist Papers, the anti-Federalist Papers. We've been through court decisions ranging from Chief Justice John Roberts all the way back to Chief Justice John Jay. We've looked at every scrap of relevant material, all the way up to the President's executive order issued earlier this week. And we distilled that information down into 9 essential amendments to the Constitution that will restore the rule of law in the United States of America. It is found in this document that we call the Texas Plan. This is more than 90 pages long, and TPPF will be proud to know that it has more than 350 footnotes. We urge TPPF to comb over every single detail in this document, which my office can give to you, or you can access online as soon as I finish this speech. But to quickly tell you what it concerns. The Texas Plan includes amendments that do what so desperately needs to be done, and that is to put teeth into the 10th Amendment. That is the best way to restore the states and the people as guardians of our Constitution. Most of you can quote the 10th Amendment. It says that power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution is reserved to the states or to the people. Madison warned ambitious encroachments by the federal government on the authority of the states would do more than just ignite opposition of the states. He warned they would be signals of general alarm. My friends, the alarm bells are going off. The federal government has repeatedly and egregiously asserted power that is not delegated to it under the Constitution, directly violating the 10th Amendment. Candidly, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times from people like Robin Lennon over here. Why don't you just enforce the 10th Amendment? That is the problem. Where is it that you enforce the 10th Amendment? Congress and the President openly scoff at the 10th Amendment, and they have reason to do so because the Supreme Court has repeatedly hamstrung states' ability to enforce the 10th Amendment. Texas has experienced this firsthand. Texas invoked the 10th Amendment to challenge the federal government because the federal government was forcing us to pay for education, health care, and other costs associated with illegal immigrants that the federal government had allowed into the state of Texas. But the court held that our 10th Amendment claim was not, quote, cognizable, and tossed the case out of court. Because courts have repeatedly limited states' rights to enforce the 10th Amendment, the Texas plan spells out that the 10th Amendment specifically gives states authority to sue the federal government when it assumes powers not delegated by the Constitution. This gives states the check against federal overreach that was intended by the founders. Next, to restore the principles of federalism as it was intended by the founders, the Texas plan adopts what about 10 states have already voiced support for. It's called the Repeal Amendment. It would allow a 2/3 majority of states to override any federal law or regulation. That would wake up Washington, D.C. Mending the 10th Amendment, however, doesn't solve all of our problems. The truth is that each branch of government has strayed from its intended role. Pop quiz time. Under the Constitution, which branch of government makes the laws? Yeah, you would think so. That you're right. That's what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that it is Congress that makes the laws. And there was a reason why the founders put that into the Constitution. They wanted the representatives that the people elect who were closest to the feelings and attitudes of those people to be the ones who make the laws that the people have to live under. And yet, more than 90% of the laws, rules, and regulations that we live under that govern your lives are never voted on by the United States Congress. Instead, most of those laws, rules, and regulations are made by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who work in federal agencies. It could be the IRS, the HHS, the NLRB, the EEOC, and the alphabet soup goes on and on and on. But you all know my favorite, the EPA. Without approval of Congress, unelected bureaucrats of the EPA issued a 1,600-page Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan forces businesses to be closed, jobs to be lost, and it will cost consumers and businesses billions of dollars each and every year. But it goes from bad to worse. When Congress learned about the havoc that the Clean Power Plan would wreak on the economy and on their constituents, both the House and the Senate voted to reject it. Then, with a stroke of a pen, President Obama abdicated the promise of our founders. He vetoed Congress's vote and reinstated the EPA agency rule, elevating the rule of unelected bureaucrats above the rule of law passed by your elected representatives. The Texas plan fixes this government run amok. Under the Texas plan, administrative actions like the EPA's would have no binding legal force unless and until they are voted on and passed by the United States Congress members that you elect. The Texas plan returns lawmaking to the process that is enshrined in the United States Constitution. Speaking of Congress, with the exception of Linda McCall, whose husband does a fabulous job protecting our country. And by the way, breaking news, in case you haven't heard, El Chapo has been captured. But other than Chairman McCall, some of you might prefer to just jettison the entire branch of Congress and start all over again. Short of that, the Texas plan has two amendments that reign in Congress. The Commerce Clause is the single biggest cause of congressional overreach. It is short and simple. In plain English, it provides three things for Congress to do: to regulate trade with tribes, to regulate international commerce, and to regulate commerce among the states, meaning interstate commerce. But today, Congress grossly exceeds the Commerce Clause by regulating things and activities that are solely intrastate. The Texas Public Policy Foundation filed a lawsuit to enforce the genuine meaning of the Commerce Clause when it represented a Williamson County man affected by the Commerce Clause. He couldn't use his own private property the way that he wanted to because his property had a cave spider on it. Despite the fact that the spider exists only in Central Texas and will never cross state lines, because the spider is on the endangered species list, it is a crime to disturb that little spider. Congress used the Commerce Clause to create the Endangered Species Act. It's one of Congress's many abuses of the Commerce Clause. The only thing that should be endangered are the representatives who voted for that Endangered Species Act. To restore the true intent of the United States Constitution, the Texas plan amends the Commerce Clause to prohibit Congress from regulating anything or activity that occurs wholly within one state. To rip off of Las Vegas, if it happens in Texas, it stays in Texas, and the federal government cannot touch it. Even more harmful to our future liberty is the unyielding appetite by Congress to spend your money. America is now more than $18 trillion in debt with no end in sight. Congress is unable to control itself, so the people must impose control. The Texas plan joins 27 other states in calling for a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. Pop quiz number 2. Everyone got 100 on the last one. Let's test you this time. How many votes does it take to amend the Constitution? 2/3 to amend the Constitution. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. It takes only 5 votes of people who wear black robes to amend the Constitution. You know, Alexander Hamilton was a great visionary, but he completely missed it when he said, quote, "The courts would be the weakest and least dangerous branch." To the contrary, we've seen in just the past few decades how they have become the most dangerous because they can change any law and are accountable to no one. It was Madison and Jefferson who predicted that unelected justices could alter the Constitution's meaning. They are the ones who turned out to be correct. Judges have moved beyond calling the balls and strikes and have turned to actively making law, rewriting statutes, and even amending the Constitution themselves. The Texas plan addresses these problems with 2 amendments. First, to go back to the math, it takes 3/4 of the states to amend the Constitution. So why can a bare majority of Supreme Court justices accomplish the very same thing? It cheapens the rule of law. It circumvents the Constitution's amendment process. It allows 5 justices to overturn constitutional precedents and to invalidate legislation. The Texas plan fixes that by setting the same 3/4 requirement for Supreme Court decisions that Article 5 already imposes for constitutional amendments. This is not uncharted territory. 2 states already do it for the Supreme Courts of Nebraska and North Dakota, and their legal systems have continued to work just fine. Additionally, the Texas plan would make Supreme Court decisions accountable to the people of the United States of America. 5 unelected, unaccountable people should not be allowed to rewrite the laws of this land without the people having a check and balance on it. The Texas plan allows a 2/3 majority of the states to override a Supreme Court decision. It's clear that the federal government has sailed far from its constitutional moorings. The question is, what are we going to do about it? The founders clearly understood there would be a need to amend the Constitution. They not only anticipated the need, importantly, they made clear that it was the states and their citizens who should play a pivotal role in amending the Constitution. So they put it into Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 sets out the process for amending it. 2/3 of the state legislatures can call for a constitutional convention to propose amendments. And no amendment would ever become effective until ratified by 3/4 of the states. For those of you math wizards who've already done the calculation, that means that it takes 34 states to call for a convention and 38 states to pass an amendment. Until just recently, we were just a few states short of calling for a convention for a balanced budget amendment. When the Texas plan passes, Texas will join other states like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Alaska, and some others, calling for a broader convention. Well, let me close with this. After the Constitutional Convention concluded in 1787, Ben Franklin was asked by a bystander, "Well, doctor, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy?" Franklin replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Every generation of Americans has faced Franklin's challenge. Do we have the will to keep our republic? 2 centuries after Franklin spoke those words, Ronald Reagan added more to Franklin's point. He said, and you know this, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. These principles apply with equal force today. The irony for our generation is that the threat to our republic doesn't come just from foreign enemies. It comes in part from our very own leaders. Leaders who have strayed from the document that was crafted in part by Franklin. Leaders such as a president who changes laws with a pen. Congress that has no need to root their laws in constitutional principles. A judiciary that rewrites laws and freely amends the Constitution. Imagine if, when that bystander approached Franklin and told Franklin that the Constitution authorized Congress to regulate a spider on his own private property, and then ask him, what kind of government do we have, a republic or a monarchy? He would say, we've got disaster. Imagine if Alexander Hamilton was told that the Constitution that he wrote allows 5 Supreme Court justices to amend it at will. He would say it would be far better to not have a Constitution at all rather than to misrepresent to the people what the Constitution stands for. The good news is that Franklin knew if the 3 branches of government strayed, there was a 4th group to rein them in. And they identified that 4th group in the first 3 words of the United States Constitution that says, "We the people." In that same Constitution, Franklin, Hamilton, Madison, all of them gave us the tool to chart our own destiny. That tool is Article 5 of the United States Constitution. The framers included a constitutional convention because they knew citizens are the ultimate defense against an overreaching federal government. Let us heed the advice of our founders. If we are going to keep the republic that Franklin said we got, if we are going to fight for, protect, and hand on to the next generation the freedom that Reagan spoke of, then we, the people, have to take the lead to restore the rule of law in the United States of America. Let's do it here in Texas. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless Texas.